Marcus Chen, a weapons engineer, discovers a revolutionary stasis field technology that can freeze incoming projectiles while accelerating friendly fire to lethal speeds. After witnessing a horrific demonstration where the weapon brutally kills a death row volunteer, Marcus realizes the technology would make warfare completely one-sided and genocidal. He secretly implants a virus in all stasis field generators that causes them to fail when activated by his DNA signature. When tensions escalate globally and the technology spreads to other nations, Marcus triggers the virus, simultaneously disabling all stasis field weapons worldwide. His act of sabotage forces world leaders to negotiate temporal non-proliferation treaty, establishing international controls over time manipulation technology. Though Marcus faces potential treason charges, he's ultimately tasked with helping prevent future temporal warfare, knowing that other nations continue developing independent stasis field research. When Marcus Chen saw a bullet stop in mid-air for the first time, he thought he was going crazy. It dangled there, 3 inches shy of his chest, a gleaming copper jacket reflecting dully in the laboratory's hard fluorescent lights. The round had been moving at a velocity of upwards of 800 feet per second when it pierced and entered the stasis field, and now it waited, patient as death, for the field to collapse, to continue and complete its lethal journey. "Unbelievable," murmured Dr. Sarah Whitmore, her eyes glued to the readouts marching across her tablet. The temporal dislocation is stable at 99.7% efficiency. He's under the flow of less than 3 milliseconds time per second in normal space. Marcus moved closer to the bullet hanging in midair. His heart throbbed against his ribs. 6 months back, he was a weapons systems engineer at the Department of Defense, specializing in conventional armor and ballistic protection. Now he was here, in the classified underground lab, 300 feet below the Nevada desert, looking at technology that rendered every weapon system on the planet irrelevant. "How many seconds can we keep the field up?" he said, in a voice so low I could hardly hear. "Theoretically, as long as you need them to, forever." Sarah typed, her fingers tripping across the control panel. The stasis generators are powered by the vacuum energy itself, the quantum fluctuations. In the vacuum, the field is self-sustaining, as long as it remains stable. The realization slammed into Marcus like a breaking wave. If they could freeze all incoming projectiles, hell, nothing could hit them with a conventional weapon. But the actual breakthrough was more than stopping a bullet. It was what they'd learned 3 weeks ago in those classified tests that had called him here. Bring up the selective field again. Hardcore Ralph the moment it reappeared. Marcus said, his throat dry. Sarah's expression grew grave. She pointed to a tech on the other side of the room who went over to initiate another stasis generator. The air rippled and shimmered as the new field activated, covering an area of space that intersected the first field a yard or 2 away. "Be sure to pay attention," Sarah added, pulling out a tiny remote control. "I'm going to fire 2 rounds at once, 1 red, 1 blue. There will be an electromagnetic signature attached to the red projectile." She pressed the button. 2 tiny spheres flew from both sides of the room and headed for the overlapping stasis fields. The blue pellet collided with the field perimeter and froze in time, traveling through it and adding to the suspended bullet. But the red sphere sailed through the first field as if it wasn't even there, then suddenly slowed down when it entered the second field but didn't stop. It settled in slow motion, crawling at maybe 1% of its normal speed. "On selective stasis," Sarah said slowly, her voice smothered with the crushing weight of what they had built. We can program the field to affect only designated objects, depending on their quantum signature. The red ball has time dilation of 99% on it. The blue ball 99.9% in rest. But here's the real scary part. Watch this. She activated a third generator. A new field manifested, and she sent a green globe at it. This one actually accelerated on its way to the field wall, traveling even faster and faster as it struck the opposite wall with a huge crash. Negative stasis, Marcus breathed. All you're doing is compressing time instead of expanding it. Exactly. We've slowed our enemies' projectiles to a crawl while dashing our own through the sky to hypersonic speeds in the same engagement zone simultaneously. The horrible nature of the thing they had created came down on Marcus like a shroud. This was more than a defensive mechanism. This was the most destructive weapon in history. Any force armed with selective stasis fields would be unassailable, their projectiles striking with impossible speed, while the opposing fire would inch forward as slowly as preserved insects in amber. The Pentagon requires a demonstration. Sarah continued, her voice intentionally vacant. General Morrison is coming out next week, flying out next week, with a full tactical assessment team. Between Air Force leaders, the Israelis, and now the Greeks, they want to see how it does. Against live targets. Marcus felt sick. Live targets, condemned prisoners, death row volunteers who have consented to play in return for commuted sentences for their families. She stopped, her hands trembling a little. Marcus, it's not just warfare that we're changing. We are turning it into such a one-sided fight that it's no longer warfare at all. It becomes execution. 3 days after that, Marcus was standing in the observation room looking over the test range as General Morrison and his team readied for the demonstration. On a screen underneath, a death row inmate, Vincent Torino, paced in a fortified cage, clad in regular body armor and gripping a weapon designed to kill on a battlefield. He'd signed up to take the test after he was told that, if he did, he would be fully pardoned and his daughter would receive $1 million payment. Subject will shoot the defense platform, Dr. Whitmore said to the other military professionals gathered. The platform has our selective stasis field generator. At the same time, it will return fire with traditional ammo powered up by our accelerating field. General Morrison grunted approvingly, his steel-gray hair and cold eyes etching the rest of his words into Lugard's memory. And the subject's ammunition. Standard NATO rounds, unmodified. Planet-side sensors will pick up their quantum signature, and the maximum temporal distance will be activated, essentially holding them in position and allowing our return fire to pass through without repercussion. Marcus wanted to vomit. He'd spent his sleepless nights running numbers, looking for some limit, some flaw in the design that would prevent its being militarized. But the mathematics were flawless. The technology was sound. And now they were about to show its lethality. On a human being. Begin the test, Morrison ordered. The training range was quiet, except for the buzz of the stasis generators slowly cranking up to full force. Vincent Torino brought his rifle up and fired fully automatic on the platform. The flashes of the muzzles strobed in the neon lights of the underground. Building dot, every single bullet froze. 30 rounds swayed above the ground like the bangles of death, woven from copper, lead. They made, perfectly, a constellation of death, suspended between the weapon and the platform, for time to take normal course. Remarkable, Morrison breathed. Now give me the offensive side. The platform had returned fire immediately. But this wasn't the steady crack you might associate with conventional gunfire. It was more distinctive, a sonorous thrum that seemed to reverberate through the facility's concrete walls. The bullets weren't just fast. They were traveling at speeds traditionally considered impossible for conventional ammunition. Vincent Torino never had time to put his rifle down. The more powerful shells hit him so hard they tore him apart. Only a red mist remained in the place he'd been moments before. The observation deck fell silent. Even Morrison appeared shaken by the brutality of the protest. Time lag is just phenomenal, Sarah said, her voice clinically detached as if she were a medical professional talking of tragic events. Our munitions experienced negative time dilation, which made them go 4 times faster than the speed of sound. Cycles of the target had positive time dilation, decelerating them to less than a foot per second. How long will they remain icy? They could be there for decades if we decided to keep the generators. Marcus got to his feet and excused himself and made his way to the closest men's room, where he vomited furiously. When he came out, Sarah was waiting for him in the hall. "I hear you," she said softly. "I haven't slept in 3 days." "Then why are we doing this?" Marcus demanded. "Why? Would we give it to them to make genocide almost easy, just by flipping a switch?" Sarah's expression was haunted. "If we don't, someone else will. The theory is already there, 'cause they've been mucking about with time for like 2 years. The Russians have a program. We don't want to be on the receiving end of stasis. Fields if we don't develop this tech first, so we're stuck in a race with the laws of physics." Exactly. And the stakes could not be higher. In the weeks that followed, Marcus threw himself into the technical details, scouring the specs for a weak spot. The stasis field generators were huge and consumed gargantuan quantities of power to initialize. But once established, they were self-sustaining. The targeted killing feature was based on quantum entanglement of the generator with specially prepared bullets, a process that required several hours of preparation in a laboratory. And it was that, the last detail, that brought him hope. The system was not yet truly ready for the battlefield. Ammo prepping was too complicated, too slow to mobilize. But he knew they were only so long before they'd crack that particular nut. The opportunity presented itself as part of a routine maintenance cycle. The main stasis generator had been turned off for maintenance, and the frozen bullets from the experiment were allowed to carry on their paths and embed themselves in the reinforced backstop. Marcus offered to help with the technical examination of the generator, which would allow him to get close to the generator's main systems. The quantum resonance chamber had been a marvel of engineering. Crystalline sphere held aloft in a grid of superconducting wiring. Here, the field effect was created. The laws of physics were warped to men's desires. And here is where Marcus dropped the virus he'd spent a month creating. It was also beautifully simple. It would be hidden there in the control systems of the generator until its activation was triggered, a quantum signature that Marcus had encoded to correspond with his own DNA. In the event of activation, it would introduce a phase variation into the stasis field, and the field would become unstable and would collapse in a matter of minutes. He dubbed it the Damocles Protocol, after the sword that dangled over a tyrant's head. Every stasis field generator they constructed would bear this hidden flaw, this sword of Damocles. But Marcus knew he was living on the edge. If the virus was found, he'd be tried for treason. If it doesn't work, it would be his fault that America is left potentially defenseless against similar arms, developed by other countries. The moral gravitas of his decision bore down on him as he secured the inspection panel and left the generator behind. He had just wrecked the most potent weapon system in human history, and he didn't know whether he was a hero or a traitor. 3 months later, the first field operational stasis field systems were installed at forward operating bases in Eastern Europe, where relations with Russia became strained. The weapons were there in all their terrible effectiveness. Complete enemy formations could be taken out without a shot, their arsenal immobilized, while the Americans had the liberty of movement. But the Russians had not been sitting still. Intel had hinted that they'd had some kind of breakthrough in temporal manipulation, and satellite imagery indicated huge construction efforts were underway at a number of military installations that were consistent with the type of installations a stasis field would require. What we have here is a time-competitive arms race. General Morrison informed the Joint Chiefs. In a year, all key military powers will obtain this technology. The risks to global stability are immense. Marcus sat in the back of the room and paid attention to the briefing, being one of just a few with a security clearance high enough to know what was being planned at the level of the generals. The Damocles Protocol was hidden deep within the quantum control systems of every generator they had ever constructed. What about defensive countermeasures? Demanded Admiral Chen, the Chief of Naval Operations. That's the problem, Morrison replied. The only thing that can oppose a stasis field is another stasis field. We're not just dealing with a situation in which moving first wins outright, it does, but only if your opponent sticks with the blue hedgehog. Then we're back to conventional warfare, only we have a battlefield that has time-dynamic battlefield properties. The truth was far more nuanced than the generals knew. Marcus had done a lot of the simulations, and the math was terrifying. When two such stasis fields collided, areas of temporal instability could occur with unclear results. Time itself was a weapon, and the battlefield swirled with a helix of change time in which cause and effect were strangled. Sir, Dr. Whitmore said, breaking in as so many had trained to do in Portland, working behind the scenes in her capacity as Chief Technical Advisor. We are picking up an anomaly in the field. Generators over the Baltic. Quantum resonance appeared to be deteriorating. Marcus's blood ran cold. The virus was activating degradation. Let something happen. Morrison's voice was acrid with worry. The field stability is declining. We're having phase differences that shouldn't be possible with the hardware we have right now. Time to failure, unknown. And the degradation it is occurring seems to be speeding up. Field integrity is something we could lose in a matter of hours. Morrison's face went pale. Are our forces protected? The defenses are still defenses, just barely. If this is some sort of attack, sir, ... It's not an assault, Marcus. Cut through the tension in the room. Every head turned toward him. It's a failsafe. The quiet afterwards was deafening. Clarify, Morrison said in a quiet, deadly tone. Marcus took a deep breath. I implanted a virus in the quantum control systems. Every generator carries it. When turned on, it adds instabilities that take down the field. You did what? Morrison's hand went at once to his sidearm. I created a kill switch by having a means to deactivate the stasis fields if they were ever used for genocide or crimes against humanity. You treacherous son of a general, please. And me, said Sarah, cutting into Morrison's tirade. Let him explain. Marcus straightened his shoulders. The virus is programmed to my DNA. It triggers only under a set condition exposure to my DNA in a quantum entangled state. I have had a little quantum transmitter in my possession for weeks. And then I realized what we were about to unleash on the world, and then I turned it on. You've blown up our entire defense posture, Morrison snarled. You know what you've just done? The Russians could attack full bore, and we'd have nothing. No, Marcus replied. That's not how it works. It's not just the virus that attacks our generators, attacks all stasis field tech, rooted in our quantum resonance principles. All other generators built by our research, including any foreign copies, will have the same degradation. The room erupted in chaos. Generals barked commands, technicians scurried to terminals, and Sarah glared at Marcus with half horror and half admiration. You've made things equal, she murmured. You've neutralized the advantage of the stasis field for all of us. Not everyone, Marcus corrected. Just everyone who, based on our research, built their systems, which, according to intelligence reports, includes the Russians, Chinese, and British programs. How long do we have? Morrison demanded. The degradation is progressive. The full field collapse at 6 hours. You will never be able to use any kind of stasis field generator on the entire planet again after that. Can the virus be stopped? Not unless we can build a new set of quantum resonance systems from the ground up. And that would take years. Morrison sank into his chair, the gravity of the matter bearing down on him. You've just reset that balance of power to before the stasis era. Conventional weapons, conventional defenses, yes, and conventional morality, conventional morality. Morrison's voice was bitter. You've making us vulnerable to any other nation that pierces through and develops stasis tech on their own. What happens when someone else creates a system that doesn't depend on our research? Marcus had considered this possibility. Then we'll address that threat when it gets here. But at least we won't be the ones with the sword at the world's throat. In the hours that followed, reports streamed in from around the world. Fields, even in the last remaining generators, were failing. Russian systems in Siberia, Chinese installations in the South China Sea, the experimental British program in Scotland, all were succumbing to the same incremental decay. The military leaders of the world scrambled to adjust. Old weapons were quickly redeployed. Classic defenses reinstituted, and the short era of time fighting was over. The president wants to see you, Morrison told Marcus 6 hours later when the last stasis field died off. He's not happy. Marcus nodded. He'd expected this. What will happen to me? It will depend on what happens over the next few days. If those Russian bastards break through our weakened lines, you will be charged with high treason. If the world is able to stabilize and pull back from the precipice of time, or you may even be hailed as a hero. And if someone else invents independent stasis tech, and you'll be the man who forfeited humanity's greatest advantage. Marcus was brought in under heavy escort to Washington. The president was in the Oval Office, flanked by the Joint Chiefs and the National Security Council. President Hamilton was younger than Marcus had imagined, his eyes intelligent, his demeanor that of a man who had spent a lifetime making impossible choices. Dr. Chen, the president said, indicating a chair. I'm hearing you single-handedly. Brought an end to the era of temporal war before it even started. I bought us some time, Mr. President. Nothing more. Time for what? To make a choice about what kind of species we want to be. It was not just military superiority that the stasis field technology had made possible. It was the ability to leave whole populations defenseless too. A capital city with functional stasis fields could have dominated the world in a few short months, and now nobody has it. Correct. We're now back to conventional warfare, conventional deterrent, conventional morals. President Hamilton folded back in his chair. The Joint Chiefs want you caught. The CIA needs to know if you've compromised any other defense programs. And we'd like to know if you've been in touch with any foreign intelligence services. I've acted alone, Mr. President. 16. I had had no other encounter with foreign intelligence services, except for publicly available scientific papers. Why should I believe you? Marcus showed no fear in his eyes as he stared the president down, because if I was a foreign agent, I would have made sure that it wasn't possible to shut down the stasis field using a virus that affected it instead. I've crippled everyone equally, including our own defensive capabilities. Yes, and I'd do it again. The room fell silent. President Hamilton stared at Marcus a long time and then addressed General Morrison. General, what is the strategic situation on the ground? Stable, sir. The Russia has taken down their forward deployments, and the China has withdrawn the fleet from Taiwan Strait. And it seems like everybody's coming to grips with the new reality. And our conventional defenses, fully operational, we're actually in better shape than we were 6 months ago, before the stasis field went out. We still have overwhelming conventional military dominance. President Hamilton nodded slowly. Dr. Chen, you have left me with an untenable position. You've just committed an act of technological sabotage, if we're honest, treason. On the other hand, you may have averted a new species of warfare that would have made a madhouse of the whole world. I know the situation I put you in, Mr. President. I'll take what's coming my way. The effects, Hamilton said, will be determined by what we do next. I'm approving a new research program, headed up by you, to begin researching the effects of time-altering technology, not for weapons purposes, but to assess the risk and to develop defenses. Mr. President, you have proven that stasis technology cannot be entrusted to just a single nation. I need you to assist us in crafting international agreements to manage research into time manipulation, a new arms control for a new type of weapon. There was a sense of relief for Marcus. You're describing a temporal non-proliferation agreement. Exactly, and you're going to help us navigate it. 6 months later, Marcus was standing in the Nevada lab where he had witnessed a bullet freeze in midair. But it was now an international research complex hosts 2 scientists from a dozen countries studying the implications of temporal manipulation technology. The Temporal Non-Proliferation Treaty became law among 47 nations, which would implement strong regulation over stasis field research and the establishment of a monitoring system capable of detecting weapons. Grade temporal manipulation technology as technology began being developed. The treaty was not great. Many countries had refused to sign on, and enforcement would always be difficult. But it was a beginning. Dr. Chen, said Dr. Whitmore, who then was serving as the center's deputy director. Other than we had a breakthrough. Come and see this. Marcus walked over to her, where she was seated in front of the main computer terminal, looking at a mathematical model on the screen. The equations characterized the interaction between temporal fields and quantum spacetime, finding patterns that had been obscured in the researcher's previous work. What am I looking at? Marcus asked. The mathematics of temporal warfare. When 2 stasis fields meet, the 2 don't simply erase the other. They produce areas of temporal instability that could influence the basic structure of spacetime. Marcus looked at the formulas, his head buzzing with implications. Wait, so you were telling me that if we fought in time, there could be consequences that rippled out of the theater? Potentially, yes. If sufficient stasis field bubbles were used at once, they could potentially cause a chain time distortion affecting an entire world. How, think of space-time as a fabric. Tiny deformations, akin to single stasis fields, are like poking a finger in stretched fabric. The fabric deforms locally, then springs back when you release the pressure. But if you push your fingers down into the cloth at multiple points at the same time, the interactions between the distortions will produce tears that do not repair. A shiver ran down Marcus's back. You're talking permanent damage to the structure of space-time itself. It's speculative, but the math works. A full-blown temporal war could have implications that endure long after the weapons fell. Silent. Did you report this to the Treaty Compliance Board? Not yet. I just need to ask you about it first. Marcus nodded. We have to take this to the International Committee at once. If you're correct, the treaty isn't simply about forestalling a new style of warfare. It's about preventing injury to the fabric of reality itself. That night, Marcus toured the facility's corridors, peering into laboratories where scientists from around the world collaborated to understand the technology he had helped build and destroy. The frozen bullet remained, subjected to the same freezing but also to a small stasis field, to remind people of what had almost been unleashed on the world. He considered Vincent Torino, the death row inmate who died in the demonstration. Man had been volunteering with the promise of a pardon and money for his family, his sacrifice uncovering the full horror of what they'd made. Marcus had, in a way, precisely this boy's death to thank for the planting of the virus and, in due course, the treaty that now governed research into time. The world was safer than it had been half a year ago. But Marcus knew it was short-lived. In hidden laboratories and secured facilities somewhere, someone was racing to create new temporal manipulation that would be resistant to his virus. The arms race had stopped, not gone away, but for now, at least, mankind had averted a crisis of time war. The stasis fields had ceased, been turned off, selectively disabled by the virus hidden in their quantum hearts. And in that silence, in that moment of sanity, they could imagine a way to make it so the power to stop time itself was never again a weapon of war. When Marcus returned to his office, there was a message waiting on his secure terminal. The letter was from President Hamilton, classified as top secret. Dr. Chen, said the message, intelligence sources say 3 states have initiated independent stasis field research programs based on theoretical premises other than our own earlier work. Your virus isn't going to be any botheration there. We need to discuss countermeasures. Please report to Washington immediately. Marcus blinked at the message for a long moment, then deleted it and started packing his bag. The war on time, in fact, had a long way to go, but at least now he knew they had allies in the battle, and a structure for international cooperation that might keep the next arms race from ending in catastrophe. The bullet still floated in its stasis field, a stark relic of the technology that had almost turned the world upside down. Now, though, it was more than an icy missile. It was a potent symbol of human determination to tame their most dire power ever found. For the first time in months, Marcus Chen permitted himself to hope that they might indeed be that intelligent, that wise.